Hello and welcome to Simplified, the weekly podcast that tries to break down things that happen in the world for your edification, but actually more so for ours. And usually, when we can't find a topic or get something going, we invite one of our close friends who is much smarter than us. And today, surprisingly, I think for the first time on Simplified, we have Nitin Sundar, who is a what do you call it?
I'm not Nitin,
Yeah.
Chuck. Hi, but we
all assumed that Nitin would have been on this podcast much earlier. He has been many things, a consultant. He did ball by ball commentary for Cricinfo back in the day. He set up the OG social media channels. I'm pretty sure he still has the access to their Instagram and Facebook accounts. But also did so much stuff in cricket and then moved on to many other things. He's currently running, I think, 2 or 3 successful podcasts. But today we're speaking about cricket, and who better to talk about it in Tamil or English than Nitin Sundar.
Thanks,
to
Tony.
have someone to simplify too, we have Chuck on the other side, who has renounced cricket in 2015 when Kochi Tuskers Kerala finally called it quits.
Why do test players have numbers on their back now? When did this become a fad? And anyway, there was a time when I actually followed cricket and Cricinfo's ball-by-ball commentary very, very religiously. In fact, I have in front of me a mail from 29 March 2011 from, let me not read out the email ID, from Nitin, from his Cricinfo email ID, which says, Ada Pavi. And this is in response to a comment that I had sent in. Rider, take a bow, even fat men can fly, says George Binoy. This kiwi sure can fly. Was that Jesse Rider or Jesse Owens? I think that was by Nitin, and my reply was, well done, Nitin. Ravi Shastri would have been proud of that. And I replied to you saying, first time I'm getting an email reply from a commentator, honored. So I can only say that it is even more of an honor, Nitin, to have you on the other side of this.
Thank you so much.
Crazy.
Thank you so much, guys. Lovely invite. I think the reason why I've not been on this show for so many years is because of that first condition you laid out. You generally invite people smarter than yourselves. So I guess that I think eventually you've finished scraping the barrel and now you're looking below that. So eventually, finally. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Yeah, one of the great OG podcasts to come out of India. So yeah, proud moment.
And
Wow. Nitin, if you've listened to his other podcasts, which I'm hoping he'll plug because I am on one of them, is known for his irreverence. Okay. And also you should realize the fact that he's from Ahmedabad's second best B school, best, which Chuck has been to, obviously, Micah. Nitin Sundar was there when weird things like Andrew Simons being racially abused for the first time in India happened, before the entire Monkey Gate, which happened in Baroda, I think, Nitin. But let's not get into controversy. We'll leave it as clickbait and get into the topic of the day, which I think we should have come up with by now. Unfortunately, we haven't. Instead, Chuck, I've got 2 jokes, one for you and one for Nitin, which you've probably already seen this morning. This actually, when I wrote it last night, I was like, there's only one person in the world who will appreciate it, and it's Chuck. And it happened to be the case that you were the first to respond to my story, which is, why don't dentists like plaque, like PLAC, right? Because it's a flossless format. Right, so Chuck very famously a connoisseur of plaque, and he'll appreciate me for throwing in random music references. But
it's a very narrow intersection of people who are fans of high-res audio and maintain dental hygiene. Good stuff.
the oral police is here, but
wow.
Before we get
oral or oral.
Yeah, Nitin Sundar speaking like he doesn't have a hard stop in about 40 minutes and doesn't care about what the topic at hand is. The topic at hand is actually about IPL, and there are lots of purists who say that the IPL is not cricket. There are people who say you're just old and don't get it, and then there are CSK fans who it doesn't matter. CSK qualifies every time, so let's watch it. It doesn't matter if Dhoni plays 1 ball or 2 balls. We just here for the entry music, which is usually Rajnikant, right? So this is the tweet I have for you, Nitin. It's my own, which says, the only way to enjoy IPL is to throw your brains out the window and jump on the adrenaline train. Basically, you give up your hypothalamus and give into hypothalama, right? So, Nitin, you're at the perfect starting point to take over from here and tell us, you've seen all kinds of cricket, from Ranji Trophy to cricket in Pakistan and like other places and associate nations, which famously you've been trolled for. What is it about the IPL, and why will it not die? And it's not just about the money, is it?
IPL benefited from coming into life at the time it did. It was the perfect moment for the IPL. Soon after, India had just won that T20 World Cup, and I would say right in the middle of India becoming a superpower in international cricket, or rather right at the cusp of India becoming a superpower in international cricket. I think if the IPL had come about 5 years earlier, or maybe 5 years later, it might not have had the same opportunity to leave the sort of imprint that it has on all of us. I believe, it is cricket. It is, of course, a whole new format of cricket, and by that I don't just mean the IPL, but all T20 cricket itself, right? And I think only now, after all these years of having watched T20, I think slowly people are coming to the realization that this is an entire new format with an entire new grammar, an entire new set of players and all of that. So it's good to see how the IPL has evolved. I'm sure we'll talk more about where it is poised to go in the future. But I don't know if that answers your question, which I don't remember now, by the way.
In many ways, I am the perfect person to be on this panel and ask you about the IPL, because not just am I the person who went to a pub yesterday and said, wow, RCB is playing very well. And when the channel was there, I said, I really need to see what's happening over here, because these guys are playing really well. And I realized I was watching a rebroadcast of another game that happened.
From which year?
No, this year only. This year only. The one where, I don't know, Kohli century went in vain or something like that, which seems to be the story of every RCB match. But no, because as you never get tired of reminding me, I was a person who, I'm a person who had a decent interest in cricket till a few years back, and just on and off. Whenever people say, "Oh, this is why Test cricket is great," and coming on and seeing what Pereira has done, and on Cricinfo, of course, and basically observing things on the sidelines. And I suppose I was one of those people in the beginning who said, "Hey, what is IPL? This is all a joke and everything. It should just be Test cricket and whatever." But I think over time I've kind of made my peace with it, and also kind of bought into the notion that this format might be the game's best shot at international expansion and all that. What do you think about this? I know this is a theory that's been floated around since 2007, 2008, but now that it's 2023 and there are actually a fair number of countries playing the sport, what do you think about that?
Obviously, like Chuck's question is still valid. I just wanted to say, Nitin, you mentioned IPL came about just after India won the T20 World Cup. But Chuck will know this. How many T20 World Cups has India won?
Sorry. Oh,
2? No, just one, which was in 2007. Do you know how many T20 internationals India had played before that World Cup?
I don't know, a handful, right? Just one or two or something, right?
Just one. And I think Nitin Rahul Dravid was the man of the match or some shit. But anyway.
No. We have to fact check. As you know, I tend to fact check on cricket podcasts. So that one day.
The first IPL. Just before we get into the serious part of it, where did you see the first IPL? For me, it was quite memorable because I actually did my summer internship at Tata Steel in Jamshedpur, and we were staying in the men's hostel over there, and we had a nice communal TV, and so everybody was like it was interesting getting reactions from various sets of people, like not just folks who would have otherwise been in just an MBA batch or something, but it was kind of interesting to see how different people are across the country, old, young, everything, were reacting to this new format, the cheerleaders, the Bollywood infusion, the glamour. It was kind of interesting, actually. So I spent like the 2 months of the IPL in that room. The evenings anyway, and watching it was quite interesting.
Yeah, no, I'll answer that question. But before that, I should go ahead with my fact check, which you guys try to brush away. So that one T20 international that India played before they went to that World Cup was against South Africa, which is the only international T20 game that Tendulkar has played in. Rahul Dravid, because he...
Sachin Tendulkar, because Arjun Tendulkar is breaking down the doors of the Indian team as we speak.
I see Chuck's eyes just widened at that mention. He has no idea what we're talking about. That is Sachin Tendulkar's son, Chuck.
Hey, I know. His name is MSC Colony.
Okay. Weird flex, but okay. No. Yeah. So Tendulkar did not then make himself available along with Rahul Dravid and Saurav Ganguly for that World Cup, which India won, and then never felt the need to recall any of them until they randomly gave Rahul Dravid a debut in the format in 2011. And Rahul Dravid played that match, and just before the match, promptly announced that he was retiring at the end of it. So that was his debut and his swan song. So that's an opportunistic plug for Heads and Tails podcast, where me and another friend of where me and another friend of
the
this
wrong podcast. Sorry.
No, yeah. On that note, I know that I have a hard stop, but we are definitely in that time of existence where there are more podcasts than there are podcast listeners. So yeah, if you ask me to plug a podcast, I could plug three.
We
Well,
at Simplified famously pioneered this format with 4 hosts and 3 listeners.
Yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
Nitin, to your point, I was just
Go on. No, I was about to answer Chuck's question. But, go on.
We'll get there. I was just saying that the time at which it came had like no real cricketing reasons and more like probably like economic reasons, right? It's not like India was overly invested in T20 as a format or anything. It just happened to be the right place at the right time. And obviously, to what Chuck is saying, it's since like become a very, very wide canvas, and the tagline is beautiful, right? Where talent meets opportunity. And I think that has borne out over the last, 15 years, however many IPLs it's been. So, sorry, Nitin.
Yeah. In fact, to slightly modify that tagline, when commerce meets opportunity is when the IPL came into being, right? And this is something that we talk about quite a bit when we talk about cricket and Indian cricket especially. The administrators don't actually take steps to take the game forward unless they really are pushed into a corner. And the IPL also was more of a reactionary move, right? Because you had the ICL, which was the breakaway league that was being planned in the aftermath of India losing the One Day World Cup in 2007 and a few other things. There was a lot of politics around cricket at that time, and people said, hey, let's take cricket out of the BCCI's hands and run our own private league. And the IPL eventually came out as the BCCI's response to the ICL, right? They took that idea and took it to the next level. Going back to that first season, right? And just to give a sense of how the world has changed between now and from then to now, you had 8 teams then, and I think the biggest concern going in for the organizers was how do you get people to cheer for a team when it's not your national team, right? And they came up with this entire rostering methodology where they put different stars in different teams. They said, okay, Tendulkar would be the face of the Mumbai franchise. Dravid would be the face.
I think it was called
the icon players concept, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was that much of a leap of faith, for cricket to make, where it was going away from nation versus nation and was going into club versus club. Though it was more a regional club versus regional club kind of format. Those worries, I think, continued for the first 2 or 3 years, right? What would happen once the Tendulkar batch, for instance, stopped playing? And it just happened so gradually, right? That you realized very soon that first batch of superstars, the pre-T20 superstars, were actually not cut out for the T20 format itself. And you had this whole new batch of players coming through who are now, multi-format, multi-dimensional players who were able to adapt to the different formats, and they just completely phased out that initial batch of players as they went. And now we've moved to the next stage of evolution where you're saying you don't even need 3-format specialists, right? You need T20 specialists. There, finally, the format is getting the currency and the respect that it deserves as a standalone format, right? And I think the IPL has played its role in taking cricket to that place. So all of that is something to be appreciative of, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, it's kind of interesting to see how. Is it a stretch to say that entire cricketing world, international, national, franchise, whatever, or other leagues are basically adjusting everything according to the IPL in many ways, like how, say, in football, how EPL is the center of everything and everything else tends to revolve around that? Would that be an exaggeration?
No, it wouldn't. And I think this is also a good opportunity for me to respond to your earlier question, right? Whether T20 is the format that cricket should use to expand into a truly international sport. I think the answer is yes. I don't see Test cricket really taking off in Slovenia, or even one-day cricket for that matter, which goes on for an entire day, right? And I don't think people or the world at large has time for formats of cricket that are so long. So T20 is definitely that format. And we keep hearing these conversations about, is cricket going to make it to the Olympics this time? Is it going to make it to the next time? And for some reason, it is still not made it there. It would be a great opportunity for cricket to finally present itself internationally. But at the same time, I know there's a slightly roundabout way to answer your question, but India pretty much runs cricket, right? We are now going through this wag the dog phase where the power in cricket has just gotten so concentrated now with India, and the IPL has definitely played its role in accelerating that, that dominance that India now exerts in cricket. The only way cricket can truly become international, global, go beyond what it is right now, which is a handful of 8-10 teams playing it at any level of seriousness, it really is up to the BCCI. And I would even say the BCCI actually being magnanimous and generous in, letting loose the purse strings and distributing it in a more equitable way to other countries, because otherwise cricket is actually not going to take off. And I don't think Indian administrators specifically have a problem with that, at least in the short term. I personally, as a fan, feel that it will affect cricket in the future, though, if you don't have many other countries that are playing the sport. Because ultimately, the reason we watch cricket, and there's at least something that I strongly believe in, is because it's the only field in which India actually is world class, right? It's the only field where we truly are at the sharp end of a leaderboard, beating outfits from other countries. The day cricket ceases to be that, I'm not sure if India will care for cricket so much. So yeah,
that's fair. So I have one. I know Tony will be bursting with questions as well. So let me just get another thing that I've been wanting to ask you, which is in T20. I definitely see the short term adrenaline rush, etc., coming in, and that's something that is not very easily matched by other formats. But at the same time, because there's so much happening, you tend to lose out on narrative. Like I'm not a big fan of cricket, but I have no idea, for example, any of the matches that happened in the last 2-3 editions, or even who the winners of the last few editions were. Or on the other hand, I can probably pick, say, one test match or something for every year over the last 10 years or something. And that's something I'm sure you guys know. So we still speak fondly of some test matches from the early 2000s and before, for instance. Do you think that's a problem necessarily, or is it something that just, purists and romantics have in their head that, oh, this is, there was a story or something? Or are we evolving? And maybe it's a true question for all sport, really. Is it evolving to forget the story and all that, just enjoy, whatever the moment is and things like that?
It's not a you problem at all, Chuck. It's basically that even Nitin remembers every single ball and stat from 90s to early 2000s. But I think it's just a change of format, right? It's like your old friends used to write on inland letter and send you a detailed letter, and you've still kept it close, but you won't know what Instagram story the person closest to you post yesterday, right? By all practical purposes, IPL is that Instagram story. No one remembers, even if they've seen the damn thing, they don't remember.
But it feels good in the moment.
But no, I think it's a feature, not a bug, actually. But sorry, Nitin, you were coming.
No, that's a good point that you made, Tony. And reflecting on that, I don't think it's just a cricket problem. It's a couple of things, right? We are living in a world of content glut. I mean, it's not just sport, or it's not just cricket, right? It's all sport, it's all content. I remember watching the same movie 50 times in a summer vacation because I loved that movie so much as a child. I'm pretty sure if I show my son the same thing 2 days on the trot, he's not going to watch it, right? Even if it is his most favorite piece of content. So that's sort of the world in which we are living in now. And also, I think this is true for all of us. We tend to look back with very fond memories at the years gone by, right? And not so much love for things. And maybe it's a feature of growing old, or it's just a feature of the human memory, the way it is. So maybe we will all look back at this era of the IPL and say, hey, we used to have it so good in the first 15 years of the IPL, because cricket would have gone to another stage by then. But also, Chuck, it's not just you who doesn't know who won the last season of the IPL or whatever, like you said. Tony and me are part of a cricket podcast where we talk about the IPL every week, and neither of us, I'm sure, remembers who played 2 days back. So that's the Bits and Pieces podcast, part of the Simplified Extended Podcast universe, as we like to call it. But yeah.
Two things I wanted to comment upon. Nitin, you said when the IPL started, you had the problem of figuring out how people support a non-country team, and then exactly 10 years later, in 2017, there's like the tensest Australia versus India test match happening in Bangalore. The knowledgeable Bangalore crowd, while the match was in its most tense situation, started chanting RCB, RCB, and that's when you knew like the evolution was complete, right? And I think Harsha Bogle, in his like very nice unclish vibe, has this comment where he says he kept seeing people wearing, let's say, Manchester United jerseys to cricket matches, and he was like, my life will be complete when I see someone wearing an IPL jersey to EPL match, right? Which I don't think is all that far away. And on the magnanimity of BCCI, Nitin, what you said, I think BCCI is current. You've seen this with all like people who make money, right? Initially, there'll be a phase where they make money, lots of money. Then suddenly they'll turn philanthropists. Like Bill Gates suddenly wants to save the world and like rid it of everything and stuff like that. BCCI still is in the money making phase. I think in about 5 to 10 years, they'll suddenly become like the biggest philanthropic organization and like support associations across the world. But not right now. Nitin's shaking his head even as I say it. Nitin has a darker, bleaker outlook of world cricket going forward.
Yeah, I do. I think what applies to Bill Gates probably doesn't apply to the people running cricket, which is largely the politicians now. And they tend to
collecting bills at the gates as people walk into IPL matches.
Well played. Yes,
at the
absolutely.
Ticket windows. Okay.
Yeah. No, I do believe, like I said, right, even when they launched the IPL, it was they were sort of coerced into action to do it. I do feel that they might take corrective steps in the future, but it might be more reactionary to cricket actually beginning to shrink, beyond recognition in some of the other countries. Sri Lanka, for instance, Pakistan, South Africa. All these countries now are actually struggling to play 3 formats of the game, right, the way they used to. And that's because all the money that's being generated in the game is going one way. And you have the IPL now, which becomes a very, very lucrative thing for some of these players to vie for. And if they're not able to run their boards and put national teams out at some stage, I think the Indian fan will probably turn to Netflix, or he'll turn to something else, which is more interesting, more exciting for him. I think that's when the BCCI will actually act and maybe try to save cricket, but hopefully it's not too late by then.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, when you're talking about formats, right, and when I try to, wrap my head around something like T20, the IPL, especially something that's been around for such a long period of time, sometimes I like to take parallels to other shifts that have happened. Like when people like ask me today, like how might artificial intelligence change the world or something like that, I try to draw a parallel with, say, how the internet itself changed business or marketing or whatever it is many years back. So, in this regard, for this particular discussion, do you think it makes sense looking at, say, how ODI cricket, for instance, changed the direction of cricket? Because I remember growing up and reading a lot about how that was the rebellious, version, and you had the Kerry Packer series and colored clothes and all that, which kind of feels natural right now in many ways as, saved cricket, as they say. So at the same time also made it more democratic, or got more teams. And do you see a sort of parallel that could possibly be drawn between the rise of T20 and say basically what I'm trying to say is you won't be able to see history while you are, in the middle of it, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? How the advent of one-day cricket changed the way Test cricket was played to an extent. It took a while. One-day cricket itself took a while to find out its right rhythms, right? And I think until the mid to late 90s, it actually was still being played, it was just colored. It was Test cricket in colored clothes for a very long period of time because players didn't know better. And then you saw that switch happening. We've seen that happening with T20 cricket as well, right? And if anything, with one-day cricket, I wouldn't say one-day cricket dramatically changed the way Test cricket was played. Maybe for a short period of time in the early 2000s when suddenly pitches became very flat, you saw a lot of runs getting scored. Yeah. But T20 cricket has actually modified the way other formats are being played as well, because at least in the late 2010s, you saw with the rise of England as a one-day team, taking a T20 template to one-day cricket, right? And suddenly you had scores of 400 becoming very regular in cricket. It's something that never happened, in the 2000s. And now you're seeing at least that spirit coming to Test cricket as well, with teams scoring much faster than they used to in the past. What the advent of T20 has also done is it has sort of shown that cricket probably doesn't have the ability to handle 3 formats at the same time. And the format that is losing out really is one-day cricket, which is losing all context. And it's even for people like us who are sympathetic to one-day cricket, having grown up watching it, it's becoming tough to actually sit through a one-day game and understand what exactly is going on, because the rhythms of one-day cricket actually don't make sense, whereas the rhythms of Test cricket still do. There's a reason why, action progresses at a certain pace in Test cricket. But having seen what can be done against a white ball in T20 cricket, it's tough to actually sit through one-day cricket. So, yeah, T20 has changed one-day cricket. It might also be the final nail in one-day cricket's coffin in years to come.
All of this we are saying in a World Cup year in India, Nitin Sundar. The ODI World Cup will happen in India. India will win it, and suddenly, like, ODIs will find a resurgence because we'll again have 5 series with Sri Lanka back to back for no reason at all other than like thrashing them. So
that could happen, right? I'm sure we'll all get excited and G'd up when the World Cup begins, especially supporting the Indian team. But the reality is also this, right? In a World Cup year, the venues for the World Cup matches have not yet been announced. The schedule for the World Cup is not yet known. And why? Because the BCCI is busy hosting the IPL. So even as far as the board is concerned, the T20 is clearly taking mental priority over one-day cricket, and that's how it is with the fans as well.
No, I wanted Nitin to develop on the fan experience for a bit because it is definitely not improved, although all of the races have poured into the IPL per se. Especially, let's take it in the context of Chepauk, which hadn't seen a CSK match for, I don't know, 3-4 years, right? And this time, like, people have just been literally on the road for like 3 days to get a ticket and still crying and not being able to get there. So
yeah, I don't think the fan has been given his or her rightful due at all. Really, all of international cricket is now being run by just one stakeholder, and that stakeholder is the Indian cricket fan, right? I think you can draw back everything that's good in international cricket right now is happening because Indian fans are following the sport globally, directly or indirectly. They're making the sport run. I don't know the exact numbers, but there's this number that people keep saying that the BCCI has about 10,000 crores of rupees in its bank account, right? And that money is just multiplying, right? It has just been, I don't know, they probably invested in FDs or mutual funds, I don't know what, but it's making money. It's not really been deployed to do a lot of stuff. I mean, sure, things have changed in cricket. Ranji cricketers, for instance, make a lot more money now than they used to. You have more stadiums that have come up, basic coaching facilities, etc., have improved across the board. But the quality of stadia and the quality of experience that is dished out to the Indian fan is still quite substandard. But yeah, I mean, there are these few sprouts of positivity that you see, right? Like you had a game in Bangalore a couple of days back, a game which really should not have happened given the amount of rain that the city had taken on the day of the game. But Bangalore has this state-of-the-art drainage facility at the Chinnaswamy Stadium, which bad time to talk about Bangalore and drainage because the city doesn't have too much of a drainage facility. We also had a tragic accident in Bangalore on the same day as this match. But within the Chinnaswamy Stadium, they have this state-of-the-art drainage facility, which I think the Augusta Masters, the golf greens where the Augusta Masters is held has the same facility, which actually enabled the ground to drain in super fast time and a match to happen. This again is money that has gone into, stadium upkeep, which I guess somebody somewhere decided that it makes sense to invest that. But at the same time, you have other grounds, I'm sure when it rains in Kolkata, for instance, the Eden Gardens can't take it and games don't happen. So there is plenty that can get done. Yeah.
Didn't Ganguly completely overhaul the drainage there also as CM?
How was that? Very possible.
No, yeah, I'm on a WhatsApp group with a Bengali friend. So I'm going by what he said. So.
Actually, let me do that again. I don't know. It's probably true. Yeah, what I was trying to say is, so there are other grounds which don't have the same facility. And sometimes when it rains, it just brings the game to a standstill. But yeah, that's one thing. But treating your fans in such a bad way is really taking things to an extreme. I don't know how patient the Indian fan will continue to remain though, right? There was this incident earlier this year where a test match was moved at the very last minute. Fans, including myself, who had bought tickets to go to that game were left in the lurch. There was no refund. There was not even an apology that was put out by the board for the last minute change in venue, right? And getting tickets for the games in Chennai, it's been in the news this year. It's been a complete mess. And it's not just Chennai, right? It's true for Bangalore. It's true for most of the other franchises as well. Most of the other cities as well and venues and I think a lot of it is down to the way cricket is run. So there is a central board and then there are the state associations that are in charge of things like ticketing. And somewhere between the cracks, it's the fan that actually falls through. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not.
That's a beautiful statement, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not waiting for things to change, but hopefully they will.
Just to quote our econ friend, right, Tariq, who's also a friend of Bits and Pieces podcast. I basically, this is a very weird thing to say. Like in Friends, they say Chandler should never tell people he doesn't like dogs, or Ross should never tell people he doesn't like ice cream because it's too cold. I am very famously an MS Dhoni skeptic. I think he's made it only to 10. I mean, he's made it to all qualifiers except two, and one time Jadeja was captaining or whatever. But anyway, still I think like MS Dhoni is extremely overhyped and stuff like that. And I was asking our econ friend, like actual pure econ guy, that why do you get so excited when MS Dhoni is playing? And he wrote a beautiful article talking about the supply demand thing, right? Which is what all behavioral economics is works on. So Dhoni gets to bat only two balls and people get excited because like even in the smallest glimpse, it is still, reminding them of what used to be. I think the same supply demand problem exists with between the Indian fan and the administrators as well. They don't care. Like they know that if they put out 30,000 tickets, there are maybe 30 lakh people who are like lining up for, to get a seat. So I don't see it changing anytime soon. So even with like 74 IPL matches in a year, we're probably left like feeling there is a little bit room for more, as it were.
No, that's true. But also, by the way, this ticketing issue specific to the IPL is something that hits certain venues in a much bigger way than others, right? Which also goes to say, while IPL is a huge cultural, or has left a huge cultural imprint on India, it seems to have caught on a lot more in a few cities than it has in others. I'm pretty sure if you go to Mohali and want to get tickets to a Punjab Kings game, you probably would get it quite easily because I don't know if there are enough takers, partly because the team has not been doing too well. But I think that's equally true for a team like Rajasthan Royals as well, which Tony is a huge fan of. You could probably get tickets to the Jaipur games quite easily. So yeah, that's there.
Yeah, so,
I think he's...
one of the things I wanted, we basically are talking about how IPL has changed and how it's changed a lot of things along with it. And this is something, all three of us are involved in marketing in some way or the other, right? So it's kind of interesting to me to see how the entire marketing calendar has kind of centered itself around the IPL in some ways, with a lot of brands actually treating this pretty much like the Super Bowl of India, like having a big part of their allocated budgets for this, and even others who are not related to the game itself, or they're not official sponsors, doing some kind of, doing
serendipity
on the action. So as somebody who's actually a marketing professional and has worked in a product company and all that during the IPL and its history. So, how have you seen this kind of play out?
No, yeah, this is... I've been directly or indirectly involved in trying in getting, some amount of that IPL mileage for various companies that I've worked for in the last few years. And it's, if you're talking to a brand or someone and trying to get money from them to do something around the IPL, you're always either too early or you're too late. Because if you go to them like 3 months before the IPL and say, hey, okay, we have this other tournament, right? You have a World Cup, or you have something else happening. You have India versus Sri Lanka series happening before the World Cup, before the IPL. Let's do something around India versus Sri Lanka, and then we can build it out during the IPL and do something, 365 days of the year. The brand will tell you, we are saving all our money for the IPL. We don't want to do anything around India versus Sri Lanka and all of that. And so you go back to them a month later around the time of the IPL and say, hey, now we want to do something around the IPL. They're like, sorry, you're already too late. We've already closed X number of deals. If you want to get in now, then it's going to cost blah, 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 right? And it's usually a huge number. There is this 2-month window seems to have become, pretty much a feeding frenzy. It's like the Masai Mara migration, right? That happens once a year, where everybody wants to get in on the action at that time. And if you miss it, it's like the holy month or whatever you want to call it. If you miss out...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, indeed.
Wow. I remember Jaideep Padya writing a nice piece for the Intersection, or the Signal, his new newsletter, the playbook, about how these IPL deals actually come about. And it's exactly what you said. And it's quite nice because he had spoken about all the various options that there are, from the t-shirts to the stands to whatever, and that famous photo of the Kotla full of pan ads versus an IPL stadium, which looked a lot neater and all that. So he gets into details of all that. So that was pretty nice. I'll link that in the notes of this episode in case anyone wants to see. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? So how the IPL has changed not just cricket and the way that is looked at as a potential career maybe, but also all the ancillary things around sports broadcast, like say marketing, or when
movie launches, for instance, right?
Exactly.
You used to have movie launches actually happen on the IPL, right? It became like the equivalent to the Kapil Sharma show, where you'd have the entire cast coming and sitting in the extra innings, studio, back when IPL was hosted on Sony.
And when I was working at Insider, and at that point of time, we were, for 2 consecutive years, we were ticketing a few of the IPL teams, and those few months were, pretty frantic. Leading up to the launch, we had to hire a lot of, there was a separate customer support team that was brought on board for this, obviously. But yeah, that was quite crazy, and everything else kind of fell by the, everything else was like secondary almost at that point of time, just like, and it's kind of like a good indication of, the rest of the country, like you said, movies and, other releases and stuff like that. And I think that was something that was noticed a long time back, like the Zuzus, for instance, was something that was launched during the IPL. And yeah, and it's, I think, as a marketing person, it's kind of nice to see that India has a Super Bowl, like an event that brands want to congregate around. And it's also breaking this fallacy that, TV is only for the mass audience, or it's only for the people who aren't on digital and stuff like that. I still, like, I'm a slightly old school marketer that way, and I still believe that irrational prestige has a role when it comes to brands. So advertising during the IPL, even if your audience is completely on digital, still has merit. So it's kind of interesting to see how the IPL, and now with this whole digital and on-ground fragmentation happening, and the two parties actively taking each other on, it's going to be even more interesting to see how they come out with different product innovations and what marketing options they can offer for brands who want to be associated with it. And since you guys have actually watched the IPL in various ways, online, offline, maybe even in the stadium, etc., have you seen like broadcast itself change in some way? Like, I know now there are multiple language options, and I think it was Jaideep again who had written about how there are different kinds of commentary even within a language. One is slightly more nerdy in nature, one is slightly more, you have those fans interacting. So that's kind of interesting to me.
There are multiple language options now, and like Jaideep said, you have multiple different versions also. But I do think most of that, I don't have the exact numbers, but I don't think more than 10% of the audience actually goes and fiddles around with too many of these settings, so to speak, right? And most people still default to the default. What you also had this year with Jio coming in on the digital side is you can now watch the IPL on your phone from multiple different camera angles. I think this existed in the past as well, but the quality of the stack and the experience has been improved to the extent that you can, it actually works, it doesn't break. So there are more and more of these little fiddly thingamajigs that are being given now to fans.
Do you think cricket is one of those games that will benefit from having different perspectives? Like, I know that this has been tossed around in the football world for a bit, which is the ability to experience the match as one of the particular players. Do you think that really matters in cricket, or is that classic angle where it is right now? I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't mind like watching the behind wala angle, like in the 80s and stuff.
So I can speak as a fan here. Typically, the default angle. The typical default angle generally tends to work the best, at least for me. There are times when you want to see a certain ball, the way the batsman saw it or the way the umpire saw it. But we also realize that human beings out there tend to move their head around quite a bit. So beyond a point, those angles become quite tough to follow because of the jerkiness. But
For instance, they put a camera on the umpire's cap, right? Like, no one would want to watch it more than 10 seconds straight. However, like, there's an interesting thing that I think it's Joy Bhattacharya who said on one podcast, which is that cricket is actually a game of replays, right? It's not a game of live action. So it means that you can very well sort of have like the default view as a live viewing option, and then when replays come up, you choose the place from which to view it. And I think that there'd be an audience for you to play around with it, right? And what has interestingly happened, right, as a result of even before the digital and whatever regular cable sort of communication happened, there was like certain regional languages that took it to the next level. Like Tamil, for instance, had RJ Balaji and all stepping in and providing some classic great alternate commentary, right? And if you remember how probably some like serious cricket writers will still tell you that Richie Benaud was the greatest commentator of all time, etc. He was for his time in his era. If he came now and commentated, people will like boot him out, right? And I think that's important to sort of take stock of as well. That the game has moved, so has the broadcast, right? For instance, other than the Tamil commentary itself, Graham Swan was the one guy who pioneered an alternate commentary stream within the mainstream, which Star used to call the dugout, right? And I think last year, once Disney took over and all, they sort of lost focus on that. This time, since Geo has bought it over, they've rebranded it as the Insiders, right? And even if you see, it's not just the commentary, you should see their attire, and it's like sponsored by AGO and stuff like that. So they just look completely different from players wearing white and white, right? They're extremely fashionable, they're extremely Gen Z forward, I'd say, and they don't look bad, right? And the commentary is really irreverent. It's like nothing classically cricket about it. So counterculture within mainstream is something that IPL is also promoting, which I think is a great thing.
The Richie Beno thing just makes me think a little bit. You guys might have come across these AI generated, artists and songs and things like, for example, somebody actually made an Oasis album using AI, although the band has been broken up for a while now. So it might be interesting to see IPL matches with, say, AI generated Richie Beno, John Arlott, and it might be quite interesting to see how that.
As long as we don't do AI generated cricket, we should be good.
So I just to bridge the two, right? I wasn't suggesting that we've moved completely from Richie Beno at one spectrum to Graham Swan at the other. I think what's been more interesting has been the evolution of someone like an Ian Bishop and Harsha Bhogle, right? When this thing started, we were like, who was going to say CA strategic timeout? We noted was commentators and put a black mark against them, right? Now, Ian Bishop fawns unabashedly about a Virat Kohli century and like loses his voice even more than when he said, remember the name as Carlos Brathwaite won a World Cup for West Indies. But basically he'll very easily in the same breath say, Tata IPL and Tiago EV, great leg space and all of that. And also then go into great commentary. So it's like been a complete evolution to say, this is not going away. How do we learn to live with it and how do we love it? So
exactly. The commentators don't have a choice, and frankly, as viewers, we don't have a choice either, right? The cost of putting together a cricket broadcast is pretty high. One thing which the BCCI has done right is it is subsidized cricket watching at least on television, right, or on your screen for most of us in India at least. So I think and the price that you pay for that is to put up with all the branding. Whether it's
Sky in England, where actually I think cricket is
it's a pay. It's on pay TV. In fact, most places in the world, cricket is on pay TV, right? Most of cricketers. You might have like one game in a test series that is on free to air, but it's only in India where you can get access to it for cheap. But it's also because cable television is cheap in India. The national broadcaster, I think, doesn't beam all India cricket matches for free. But it's just the nature of the ecosystem.
Beam boy. But Nitin, just to conclude, one final question for you. As someone who sees a bright future for the IPL and also knowing there are people who have fallen out of love with IPL as it were, but also would like to fall back in love with it. I was one of those people. I think I saw the first season, then the next few I didn't watch probably. Then like 2014 or 2015 onwards, when the world went to shit, I started watching the IPL again. How do you fall back in love with the IPL again if you've taken time off from the game?
Wow. I don't know how to answer that question because...
Should we cryogenically freeze MS Dhoni for like 10 months a year?
Hasn't that already been done? But no. As far as... See, at least I can speak for myself, right? During the IPL, I do... Midway through the season, generally the fatigue does set in for me as well. Where I'm like, okay, why are these two teams playing again? It's the captains seem to be into it. They don't even know who their players are, etc. But then I'll find myself on that very same weekend watching a couple of games, having a good time for some time and thinking about the game for a while. And then towards the end of the season, the excitement builds up anyway. So you are watching the last few games. And when the new season begins the next year, I always feel that I'm drawn back into it because it's been 12 months since you've seen this entire garish spectacle that's been put together, right? Which is something very Indian about the IPL and something very unique about it, which international cricket doesn't have. And you only get that for two months, right? And so at least for me, that always works. They are talking about making it a longer event, a 6-month long IPL, which goes on forever. I think that might be, when the golden goose is truly
Do you think
destroyed.
But actually, just on that path, and this is my last question. Do you think there's actually merit in? Forget how the rest of the cricketing world aligns to this. That the IPL actually does become a 6 to 9 month event on the lines of the EPL, where there are 20 main teams, and then there are just a second league below that. Teams are relegated, promoted, or 10 teams, 15 teams, whatever the case may be. Do you think this is something that could possibly happen in the future?
I think it could for fans, because even now, if you see, most fans have already, and this is where things have changed from the first few seasons of the IPL, right? The first few seasons, you would go and watch a Mumbai game, or you would watch a Mumbai game because Tendulkar was playing in it. Doesn't matter which team you were supporting, right? And there was this final in 2010 in Chennai where Chennai defeated Mumbai. And the Chennai crowd was actually cheering Tendulkar on during that chase until he got out, right? And then they were cheering Chennai Super Kings to win. That has changed now, right? You very clearly know that people align along their teams. It doesn't matter if you're a diehard Delhi person. You would not really support RCB just because Virat Kohli is playing for them, right? But if you're from Bangalore, you would support, like Tony mentioned, right? Even if a test match is going on in Bangalore, RCB gets its support. So if most fans are anyway invested in their own teams and they're only going to watch 1/8 of the games because they're only interested in, their teams, I guess there will be appetite for a 6-month-long IPL. As someone who watches cricket in a little more universal manner than, a very set sort of fan who would only be following a game, I don't know how I would keep track of an IPL that goes on for 6 months. But I guess we will figure out our way, right? At the end of the day, it is
one
cricket.
thing I do have to say kudos to the IPL for is how the format has inspired the similar formats in other sports. I'm not sure whether you'd have a, say, volleyball league, which is in many ways stylized like the IPL. And even when I walk around in my neighborhood, I see, Kabaddi or ISL even for that matter. Like even the local teams, like you have Goregaon,
Parel Premier League.
Parel Brigade and all that. And you see, this is so clearly inspired by the IPL. So I guess in some sense, and this is like one of those things that made me reluctantly say that, okay, fine, IPL does have a space and all that, which is actually getting things started at a very grassroots level. So, that would be...
There's also the Celebrity Cricket League where Mohanlal is still bowling, except it's Amit Mishra with a hair job. So, Chuck, have you seen Amit Mishra's new hair? He looks exactly like Mohanlal.
No, I do not know who Amit Mishra is actually.
Oh my God.
So I'm really sorry about that. So anyway, we have actually, listeners of the show might have wondered why only Tony and I have been speaking till now. And that's because one of us wasn't available. The other we have actually kept gagged throughout, just like how CSK holds back Tony for the last two balls for those exciting moments. We have kept Naren back now. Excuse me, assistant. The rope you can just let. No. The ice also you can. Yeah, okay, good. Naren, can you hear us? Sorry about that. Okay,
are you strangling a monkey or what?
Naren, you can sign us off now, Naren. With no context.
Stay safe, stay knitted, and stay simplified. Yeah.
Stay fit, stay clipping for Chennai, but enough about MS Dhoni.
And congratulations to RCB finally for having won.
Oh, what?
For having won in that highlights game that he was watching.
Join us for next. See you guys next week.